welcome her.
Hello, it's so, can you guys hear me okay? I feel like I'm starting with the, can you guys hear me okay? Oh, this is better. Awesome. So I can say that having been part of Christie's group, I can vouch for everything that was just said. It is an incredible group of people, and especially if you're new to Seattle, Siberia, or otherwise, this is a wonderful table to get around because you just meet folks you wouldn't normally meet. So you have folks from government, you have folks from public sector, folks from private companies. So I highly encourage checking it out, and you get to do good, so why not? I'm Harini Gokul. Thanks for the introduction. I've never been here, and it's my loss. I wish I had discovered this group when I was new to Seattle. I'm in the tech business, like most of you, like many of you. I invest in startups, and especially female-founded startups, and it's really the second hat I'm wearing for the conversation today. I wanted to share a little bit about how my thinking on diversity and inclusion has evolved over the years. I started by pretending it didn't exist and that I was like everybody else, and it would just sort of all work out to where I am today. And why now? We've been talking about it for 20 years. Why do we care, especially now? Why is it code red now? And I want to share a little bit of my learnings and the questions I asked, and hopefully it'll provoke questions in your head, and there'll be some actionable things you could do as you go back into work. So where it all started, I was coming back from a conference in Europe, 2016. It was one of these echo chambers of women leaders, all going rah-rah, we are awesome, look at the progress we've made, pat yourself on the back. I'm sitting in the lounge reading an article, and it's about this MIT researcher who worked in the applied media labs, Joy. You guys know the story? Then I'll cut it short. So, turns out, Joy was building a facial recognition software, and she realized that the model did not recognize her. But it recognized her colleagues. The colleagues were lighter skinned and male. You guys know how this happened, right? The model was trained based on sort of male, lighter skinned images, and as a result could not recognize female images or darker skinned images. That got her mad. She does wonderful work. It got me mad. When I get mad, I do something about it, and I started thinking, talking about it, because for someone like me who left an arranged marriage in India to come and have a whole career, I'm a nerdy engineer, to think of a world where you may not exist, or where my biracial child may not be able to see himself in a future model, is a very real and scary thought that needed to be addressed. And that was powerful motivation for me to start thinking about why and what could we do about it. And it's important now because we're in the middle of what I call, what the World Economic Forum calls the fourth industrial revolution. And it's a fancy word to say there's a whole lot of innovation, it's happening so fast, and the change is going to be compounded. We've seen change before. The steam engine happened, electricity, we all lived and worked through the third information technology revolution, right? A desktop in every home and all that. The wonderful news is it sets us up. An army of robots walking in and taking our jobs? Not really, but there is some of that, right? Automation is a reality. The real conversation is the convergence we are at. For the first time ever, the boundaries between physical, digital, and the biological world are blurring, right? The car is the ultimate electronic device. So then the conversation becomes about not just technology. It was driven by technology, but the conversation is about what are the human impacts, what are the societal impacts, what does trust mean, what does data mean, what does data privacy mean? Is my data mine? Is my data yours? Does it belong in a data center in Ireland? Perhaps, right? And what does ethics mean? Who gets to monetize my data and what do you use it for? And that's the change that I feel strongly about. I know there are others who feel strongly about it because like all disruptions in the past, there is an incredible amount of upside here. Every revolution brings with it jobs and economic opportunity. So we want that for this one. But we also see a potential where the gap could widen between the haves, the have-nots, between genders. The wage gap is widening as one example. So what's the solution? Thinking about human and equity-centered design. How do we design for a society that's based on the human experience? And more importantly, how do we design very intentionally for a diverse and inclusive environment? We've been doing diversity training for, I've lost sight, for like the 20 years that I've been at work. Tell me somebody who's not done diversity training. Put a hand up if you've not done it. This is how bad it is, right? We all do it, but at this point, we have to train our models, we have to train our data to not have the bias that we have unconsciously within ourselves. So what I'll end with is, there are lots of different conversations you could have, but individually, and for the companies you work for or you lead, there are 3 things. 1, think, introspect, and think about your culture and the purpose. In this era of change, companies with purpose are likely to do better because they are going to ask the tough questions that talk about ethics, that talk about how data will be used, and whether we are carrying through bias. Second, the thinking around people. Thinking about reskilling, skilling people, thinking about the education model, right? You may not, 2 masters is always nice. I have to tell my mom that I didn't, there are folks who will not, you may not need the 2nd masters anymore. But thinking about education in a new way, a 4-year degree is necessarily not the only way to get to the future of work. So how do we look in untraditional places? How do we look for untraditional people? And how do we look for untraditional competencies? Third, for everyone here, you are here, and that is a symbol of position, it's a symbol of power, and it's a symbol of privilege. Use it. Be an ally at work. When you see underrepresented teams, when you see people of color, when you see a point that needs to be made, help make that point. Use your voice for impact. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Okay, questions.
We got it all figured out.
Okay. Oh yeah, we have one.
So what do you do? You're an investor?
So I did 20 years of, I did 15 years of building businesses for Microsoft and IBM. I'm transitioning to a company on this side of the lake starting the fall. Yeah, and I do this, I invest in female-funded businesses because you have to walk the talk. Talk is cheap, walk is hard. If you have the money to support a fellow entrepreneur in a space that's needed, go invest that money.
You spoke of filling that diverse funnel and doing things differently. What kind of things that can we do differently as recruiters and HR folks to help our companies find their talent?
I love this question. I had a conversation with Maggie right before this. So I'll say 2 things, and this is, each one of this is like 2-hour sessions. The question was, how do you, we spoke about filling the diversity gap by hiring untraditionally. How would you go find that diverse talent? Sure. And I'll say there are 3 things, right? There is, what are you looking for? How do you go look for it? Third, how do you pick? And the 4th piece, we won't get to it, is once you hire, the real job starts of making sure that person is set up for success and they thrive in the environment. But what you're looking for, most of us, including me, start with a JD full of the skills and capabilities we need. Let's start with the job that needs to be done. Research has shown that when you start with the job that needs to be done, you're more gender blind. You tend to talk factual skills that are required as opposed to adjectives. So here is an example. When you see a sales role, a lot of sales roles, the adjective aggressive will pop up multiple times. Forceful, driven. These are all adjectives that skew towards one gender versus another. So you start there. You start by saying, let me take out my unconscious bias by writing the job to be done versus filling it up with capabilities that reflect a previous world. Second, when you hire, use your ERGs, use your community, seek non-traditional ways. Community colleges are a great way to go. Community resources are a great way to go if you're volunteer groups. Don't always go back to the schools that you've always hired from. Use those as well, but expand your net because especially in the fourth revolution, you need skills that are not taught behind a school desk. You need curiosity, you need reasoning and critical power, right? So these are skills that you can find regardless of the degree somebody comes with. Did I answer? Did we get there? Okay. One more? Yes, please.
I've been asked to start a women's group at our small startup, and I'm concerned about it being a lot of rah-rah and not action.
Yes.
Any advice as to what we can do to have it be actionable and not just rah-rah?
Yes. So let me start by saying that one, I never used to do these talks because you cannot have sometimes I'm the only in a room, in many places, in planes, in rooms, in boardrooms, wherever. And you cannot have the only also carry the burden of agitating and advocating, which is why I end by saying you need to have allies who can support you so you're not out there on your own. So one, I struggle with the idea of us being signed up to do D&I work. Second, if yes, then check the tone from the top. I find that seeing is believing. There are companies where diversity and inclusion is a true priority, and you will know it in a couple of ways. One, by the CEO and the C-level stating it in their priorities. Look for the publicly published documents, board calls, the calls on street, you should see them. Second, follow the money. If you don't have a budget, don't do the job. They need to put money so you are set up for success. Third, it cannot be a hero effort. You need to have a community come together to help support you. Fourth, you need to know what the outcome is. How do you know you're successful? Most folks, in my experience, it's easy to do it because it looks great. It's a great check box, and for many large corporations, you need to tick the box to get to the sort of the corporate vice president level, right? Don't fall into that trap. Ask the questions, and then take the money and use it for all the right things.